They thought I was done. They thought that the moment I walked out of my own house, the house I built with 32 years of work, the house where my kids took their first steps, they had won. What they didn't know was that I had already made one phone call, and that one phone call was going to change everything. My name doesn't matter much. What matters is this: I spent my whole life building something real. A small chain of hardware stores across 3 counties in central Ohio. Nothing glamorous. Not Amazon, not some tech startup, just good honest work. The kind where you know every supplier by name. Where your Saturday morning regulars ask about your knee surgery. Where the guy running the paint mixer has been with you for 19 years. I started with one store in Findlay when I was 31. By the time I was 58, I had 4 locations, 12 full-time employees, and a reputation I was proud of. My wife Carol passed 8 years ago. Breast cancer. She was gone in 14 months from diagnosis. And I spent about 2 of those years afterward just going through the motions. Opening the store, closing the store, eating cereal for dinner, watching the same 3 channels. My daughter Natalie was the one who pulled me back. She'd come over on Sunday evenings and just sit with me. Didn't always talk, just sat. I'll never forget that. You don't forget something like that? My son Warren was different. Always had been. Not bad, just driven in a way that sometimes felt like it had nothing to do with the people around him. He was smart, went to Ohio State on a partial scholarship, married a woman named Sandra about 6 years ago. I liked Sandra well enough at first. She had sharp eyes and a quick smile, and she always said the right things. It took me a longer time than it should have to understand that saying the right things and meaning them are not the same. The ring had belonged to Carol's mother. A simple gold band with a small square-cut sapphire. Carol wore it on her right hand every day of our marriage. When she passed, I kept it in a velvet pouch in the top drawer of my nightstand. I never talked about it much, but anyone close to me knew what it meant. It was the only piece of her I still had that I could hold in my hand. I noticed it on Sandra's finger at Easter dinner 2 years ago. I didn't say anything right then. I thought maybe I was wrong. The light in my son's dining room was dim, the kind of under-cabinet LED lighting that flattens everything. I told myself I was confused. I told myself I'd check the drawer when I got home. The drawer was empty. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time that night. I kept thinking about how it had gotten there. Nobody had a key to my house except Natalie, Warren, and my neighbor Bud. Warren and Sandra had been over for Thanksgiving 3 months before. They'd offered to help clean up, stayed later than the others. I had been grateful. I called Warren the next morning. I asked him as calmly as I could manage whether he knew anything about his mother's ring being missing from my house. There was a pause. Then he said, "Dad, Sandra found it in the guest bathroom. She's been holding on to it for you. She was going to give it back," I said. "She's wearing it, Warren." Another pause. "Longer this time. It looks similar to hers," he said. "You're probably misremembering. I want you to understand something. I'm 63 years old. I held that ring in my hands the night my wife died. I know exactly what it looks like. The small chip on the inside of the band, where Carol caught it on a cabinet door in 1991. The way the sapphire sits just slightly off center, because her mother had it reset in the 70s and the jeweler wasn't quite precise. I am not misremembering. I said, "All right, Warren." And I hung up. That should have been the end of it. That should have been the moment I called a lawyer, changed my locks, and made some hard decisions. But he was my son. I taught him to ride a bike in the Kmart parking lot on Route 224. I'd sat in the hospital waiting room for 6 hours when his appendix burst when he was 9, reading the same magazine over and over without absorbing a single word because I was so afraid. You don't just switch that off. So I waited. I watched. And things got stranger. Warren had been working with me at the stores for about 4 years at that point. I'd brought him in as operations manager, good salary, profit sharing, a title he could put on LinkedIn. I thought I was building something to hand down. That's what you think when you're a father. You think you're building something to hand down. About 8 months after the ring incident, I started noticing irregularities in the inventory reports. Small things. A variance here. A reconciliation that didn't quite add up there. I'm not an accountant, but I've been running books for 3 decades, and I know when something smells off. I asked my bookkeeper Phyllis to run a quiet audit on the last 18 months of purchasing records. Phyllis has been with me since the second store opened. She's the kind of woman who can find a $40 discrepancy in a quarterly report and track it back to a single vendor invoice from 7 months ago. She came to me on a Thursday afternoon and closed my office door behind her. She put a folder on my desk. I didn't want to believe it, she said, so I checked it 3 times. Over 18 months, approximately $74,000 had been quietly redirected through a series of vendor overpayments and fraudulent purchase orders. The vendor accounts were real companies, supplies we actually used, but the invoices had been slightly inflated, the overages siphoned into a holding account that I had never seen before, an account that had been opened in the name of the business but with a secondary signatory I had never authorized. Warren. I sat with that folder for 4 hours. I didn't call anyone. I didn't go home. I just sat there in my office while the store closed around me, listening to Phyllis turn off the lights one by one, until I was alone in the dark with 74,000 reasons to feel like a fool. The confrontation came 2 weeks later. I'd been to see an attorney in the meantime, a woman named Patricia who came recommended by my longtime accountant, and who had a reputation for being meticulous and unsentimental, which was exactly what I needed. She told me what my options were. She told me what the exposure looked like. She used words like embezzlement and civil recovery and potential criminal referral in a calm, measured voice, the same way you discuss the weather. I went to Warren's house on a Sunday afternoon. Sandra answered the door. She was wearing the ring. I could see it plain as anything in the afternoon light. Warren came to the door, and before I could say a word, he said, "Dad, we need to talk to you about the business." We sat at their kitchen table. Sandra brought out coffee I didn't want. Warren had a folder of his own, which he slid across the table to me. It was a proposal, his word, for a restructuring of the ownership of the stores. He said the business needed fresh leadership and modern systems. He said that at my age, I should be thinking about stepping back. He used the phrase transition plan 4 times. The proposal would have transferred a controlling 60% stake to Warren, with Sandra listed as co-owner. I looked at him for a long moment. This boy who used to fall asleep on my shoulder at church. This boy I'd bailed out of 2 car payments and a credit card debt before he'd even turned 30. "Is this what you want?" I asked. "It's what makes sense," he said. Sandra nodded. She had her hands folded on the table, the ring catching the light. "And if I say no?" Warren looked at me steadily. "Then we're going to have some difficult conversations about the direction of the company. And about," he glanced at Sandra, "about what we're prepared to do going forward. As a family." That was the threat, dressed up in business language, but a threat all the same. I picked up the folder. I looked at it for a moment, then I set it back down on the table. "I need to use your bathroom," I said. I went down the hall. I didn't use the bathroom. I stood there for 60 seconds, breathing slowly, thinking about Carol, thinking about the first store, thinking about Phyllis closing my office lights one by one. Then I walked back out to the kitchen. "No," I said. Warren started to speak. "No," I said again. "I'm not signing anything. I'm going home now. And Warren, I know about the vendor accounts." The color left his face like someone had pulled a plug. I drove home. I called Natalie. She didn't say much while I talked. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment and then she said, "Dad, whatever you need, I'm here." She came over that evening and we sat at my kitchen table the way she used to sit with me after her mother died. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely alone. The next month was the hardest. Patricia filed a civil suit for recovery of the embezzled funds. The documentation Phyllis had put together was thorough enough that Warren's own attorney apparently advised him immediately that contesting it would be costly and unlikely to succeed. There were conversations I wasn't part of, negotiations I let Patricia handle, because I'd learned by then that my emotions were not an asset in a room with lawyers. Warren called me twice. I didn't answer. He left voicemails that started angry and then got quieter and quieter. The second one, he sounded like he was going to cry. I listened to it 3 times. I didn't call back. There were things I hadn't told anyone yet, things I was still working through myself. I'd updated my will 6 months before all this started, partly because Patricia had nudged me about it and partly because it was just something I've been putting off for years. The stores, the property, the investment accounts, all of it had been structured in a way that, if Warren had succeeded in getting me to sign that proposal, would have effectively handed him leverage over the entirety of my estate. I don't know if he knew that or if it was a coincidence. I spent some time thinking about it and I still don't know. What I do know is that I never signed. The civil matter settled about 4 months after Patricia filed. Warren agreed to repay the full $74,000 over 3 years, acknowledged the conduct in writing, and resigned his position with the company. His name was removed from any business documents. Sandra's name never appeared on anything, though I had questions about her involvement that were never fully answered to my satisfaction. I removed Warren from my will during that period. It was one of the harder things I've done. It wasn't done in anger. I want to be clear about that. It was done because I had to be honest with myself about what I had seen. A person who will steal from you and then look you in the eye and tell you you're misremembering, that person has already made a decision about who you are to them. I wasn't going to pretend otherwise. Natalie never asked me to put her in his place. Never once. She just kept showing up on Sunday evenings. About 2 months after the settlement, I got a call from Warren's number. It was Sandra. She started by saying that Warren was going through a really difficult time and that she hoped I could find it in my heart. She said the word family 11 times. I counted. She asked if we could meet for coffee, just the three of us, to talk things through. I told her I wasn't ready for that conversation. She said, "You're going to regret cutting your son out of your life." I said, "I appreciate your concern," and I ended the call. I thought about the ring for a long time after that. I hadn't asked for it back in any formal way. It wasn't part of the civil action. It was jewelry. It was complicated. And Patricia had advised me that pursuing it separately would be more trouble than it was worth. But I thought about it. I thought about Carol catching her hand on that cabinet door. I thought about the jeweler in the 70s and the slightly off-center sapphire. 3 months after the Sandra phone call, a small box arrived in my mail. No note. The ring was inside. I don't know what prompted it. I don't know if it was guilt or advice from their attorney or just some calculus I'll never be privy to. It doesn't matter. I held it in my palm for a long time, standing at my kitchen counter. And I thought about Carol. And I thought about what she would have said about all of this. She was wiser than me in most ways. She always said that you can't hold onto things by clenching your fist around them. I put the ring back in the velvet pouch. I put the pouch in the nightstand drawer. There's a woman I've been seeing for about 8 months now. Her name is June, and yes, I know it sounds like something from a movie, but that really is her name, and she really did come into my life when I needed something to look forward to. She's a retired school librarian from Bowling Green. Funny in a dry, quiet way, and she has never once asked me to be anything other than what I am. Her kids like me. I like them. It's slow, and it's careful, and it's right. Natalie came over last month with her husband and their 2 kids, my grandchildren who are 8 and 5, and completely indifferent to the complications of adult life in the way that only young children can be. My grandson spent 40 minutes trying to show me a card trick that didn't quite work, and I sat there and watched it fail 6 times and told him it was amazing every single time. My granddaughter found an old photo of Carol in the living room and asked if that was my wife, and I said yes. And she said, "She looks really nice." And I said she was. She really was. After dinner, when the kids were watching something on the TV and Natalie and her husband were doing the dishes over my protests, I went and stood at the window for a minute. The backyard was getting dark. The garden Carol planted along the fence is still there. I've kept it up not because I'm much of a gardener, but because I can't quite bring myself to let it go. I thought about Warren. I think about him more than I probably should. I think about the good years, before Sandra, before the money got involved. Before whatever happened. I think about him at 9 years old, white-faced and scared in a hospital gown, reaching for my hand. I don't know if we'll find our way back to something. I genuinely don't know. What I know is this. I still have the stores. I still have Phyllis and my Saturday morning regulars and the guy at the paint mixer who's been with me 19 years. I still have Natalie, who never asked for anything but shows up anyway. I still have Carol's ring in the nightstand drawer and June's number on my phone and my grandchildren's sticky-fingered hugs and a backyard garden in the late evening light. And some nights, that is enough. Some nights, that is enough. Some nights, it is more than enough. The ring came back in a small box with no note. That's the detail I keep coming back to. No explanation, no apology, no signature. Just a box in my mailbox one afternoon, like something that had simply found its way home. I've thought a lot about why things happen the way they did. Not in a bitter way, I'm past that mostly, but in the way you think about things when you're 63 and the nights are quiet and you have more past and future to look back on. And what I keep landing on is this. The choices Warren made didn't happen all at once. They accumulated. Small decisions, small compromises, small moments where he chose convenience over honesty, until one day he was sitting across from his father with a folder full of fraudulent invoices and a proposal to take everything I'd built. People don't become that overnight. And neither does the damage, what I know now. What I maybe always knew but didn't want to face is that integrity isn't something you can borrow against. You either have it in the room with you, or you don't. Phyllis had it. She checked those books 3 times before she came to me, because she wanted to be sure. She didn't want to be the person who brought me something wrong. That's what it looks like in practice. Not a grand gesture, not a speech. Just a woman closing my office door and putting a folder on my desk and telling me the truth because it was the right thing to do, even though it was hard. I've paid Phyllis well over the years. I've never paid her enough. And the intelligence it took to get through all of it. I don't mean cleverness. I mean the kind of clear-eyed thinking that doesn't panic, that waits, that reads the situation before it acts. I'm not naturally patient. Ask anyone who's known me for more than 10 minutes. But I'd learned by then that my emotions in a room with lawyers were a liability, not an asset. So I let Patricia do her work. I kept myself out of conversations I would have damaged. That kind of discipline, knowing when to act and when to stay still, that's something I had to learn the hard way, over a long time. I don't think I could have managed it at 40. What got me through was simpler than any of that, though. It was just the refusal to quit, not dramatic refusal, not a speech, not a confrontation, just waking up the next morning and going back to the store, talking to my Saturday regulars, letting Natalie sit with me on Sunday evenings even when I didn't want company, keeping Carol's garden along the back fence because I couldn't bring myself to let something she tended go to ruin. That kind of persistence doesn't look like strength from the outside. It just looks like a man going about his day. But it's the thing that kept everything from unraveling. Warren is out there somewhere, making whatever choices he's making now. I don't know how the story ends for him. I hope it ends better than it looks from where I'm standing. I genuinely do, because whatever he did, he was also the 9-year-old who grabbed my hand in a hospital gown. And I can't make myself forget that, and I'm not sure I'd want to. What I have is enough. That's what I know tonight. The stores, the people in them, Natalie, June, my grandchildren's sticky hands, and the card trick that never quite works. Carol's ring in the drawer. The garden. It's enough. On most nights, it is more than enough.